The prison stood far from the city, surrounded by dry land and heavy silence. The walls were tall and pale, built to hold time still for the people inside. Guards walked the long corridors every day, hearing the same sounds and seeing the same faces. Among those faces was a man named Adam. He had lived behind those walls for many years, long enough to forget the smell of rain and the sound of free streets. He spoke little and caused no trouble, and most guards described him as calm and respectful. Adam spent his days sitting quietly in his cell, reading old books or staring through the small window near the ceiling. The window showed only a narrow strip of sky, but Adam treated it like a treasure. He watched the sky change colors from morning to evening, reminding himself that the world still moved outside. He carried deep thoughts inside him, but he never spoke of them. His past was known only through files and records, not through his voice. On one early morning, the prison felt different. The air was heavier, and even the guards moved more slowly. Everyone knew what day it was. Adam knew it too. He woke before the guards arrived, sitting upright on his bed with his hands resting on his knees. His face showed no fear, only a quiet sadness that had grown familiar over the years. He had made peace with many things, but not with everything. A guard named Mark stopped outside Adam's cell. Mark had worked at the prison for a long time, and days like this never became easy for him. He opened the door and stepped inside, holding a small folder. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed discomfort. Adam was informed that he was allowed one final request. The words were spoken clearly, as they always were, but their meaning carried great weight. Adam lifted his head slowly and looked at Mark. For a moment, he said nothing. His mind traveled far away from the prison walls, back to a small house, a dusty yard, and a loyal companion who once followed him everywhere. Adam finally spoke and asked to see his dog. His voice was soft, but firm. The name Rocky left his lips with care. He explained that Rocky had been with him before his arrest, that he had trained him, fed him, and treated him like family. Adam did not ask for food or comfort or delay. He asked only for that one moment. Mark hesitated. Such requests were rare. He left the cell and spoke to his superiors. The request moved through several offices, meeting silence and raised eyebrows. Some said it was unnecessary. Others felt it would do no harm. After careful discussion, permission was given. No one expected anything unusual from a meeting between a man and his dog. Rocky was brought to the prison later that day. The dog was older now, his fur mixed with gray, his steps slower than before. Still, his eyes were sharp and full of awareness. When the vehicle stopped near the prison entrance, Rocky lifted his head and sniffed the air. His body grew alert, as if something deep inside him recognized the place. A handler led Rocky through the long halls of the prison. The sound of the dog's paws echoed against the floor, drawing quiet attention from guards and staff. Some paused to watch, curious about the unusual visitor. Rocky walked calmly, but his focus never broke. His nose moved gently as he took in every scent, every change in the air. When they reached the meeting room, Adam was already waiting. He stood near the center of the room, his hands shaking slightly for the first time in many years. The door opened, and Rocky stepped inside. For a brief moment, both man and dog froze. Then recognition flooded the space. Rocky ran forward with sudden energy, barking softly and wagging his tail. Adam dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around the dog, holding him tightly. His face pressed into Rocky's fur, and his shoulders trembled. Guards turned their heads away, giving the moment privacy. The room filled with emotion that words could not easily describe. Adam spoke gently to Rocky, calling him a good boy and telling him how much he was missed. Rocky responded with excited movements and quiet sounds, licking Adam's face and pressing close. It was a reunion built on years of trust and shared history. For a short time, the prison walls seemed to disappear. Then Rocky's behavior changed. The dog stopped moving and pulled back slightly. His tail lowered, and his ears shifted forward. He began sniffing Adam more intensely, moving around him in tight circles. This was not the behavior of a dog simply greeting a loved one. It was focused and serious. The handler noticed immediately and felt a sudden tension. Rocky had been trained long ago for specific work. His reactions were not random. He barked once, sharp and loud, then again. The sound echoed through the room and made everyone step back. Rocky moved to Adam's side and pawed at his clothing, barking again. His eyes were fixed, and his posture was firm. He then sat down abruptly and refused to move, a clear signal from his training. The handler's face turned pale as understanding formed in his mind. Guards exchanged uneasy looks. Mark stepped forward and asked about the dog's training. Adam looked confused and explained that Rocky had once been trained to detect certain materials during search and rescue work. Adam had never imagined it would matter again. The room grew silent. Rocky barked once more and stayed seated, eyes locked ahead, refusing any command to move. His body was tense, his focus unbroken. What was meant to be a final goodbye had become something else entirely. In that moment, questions filled the air. The calm routine of the prison was shattered by the possibility that something important had been overlooked for years. No one spoke, but everyone felt it. The truth was closer than anyone had expected, and it had arrived on 4 quiet paws. The room remained frozen in silence after Rocky sat down and refused to move. Guards stood still, unsure of what to do next. The handler tried to call Rocky by name, but the dog did not respond. His training was clear in every part of his posture. He was signaling that something important was present. Mark stepped closer and raised his hand to stop the handler from pulling the leash. He had seen trained dogs before, and this behavior was not confusion. It was certainty. Adam watched the scene with growing worry, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes moving between Rocky and the guards. Rocky barked again and pressed his nose toward Adam's jacket. The handler slowly explained that Rocky had been trained years ago to detect specific materials during rescue work. He explained that the sitting signal meant a confirmed detection. The handler admitted that Rocky never used that signal without reason. The guards exchanged looks filled with tension. This meeting was meant to be short and emotional, not complicated. Yet something had clearly gone wrong with the plan. Mark ordered everyone to step back and called for a supervisor. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway as more staff arrived. Adam was gently asked to step away from Rocky. He complied without protest, though confusion showed on his face. Rocky remained seated in the same spot, unmoving, eyes focused. His calm intensity made everyone uneasy. The supervisor arrived and listened carefully to the handler's explanation. He asked questions about the dog's training and history. The handler answered each one clearly. Rocky had been reliable in the past. He had helped locate missing people and hidden items. He had never given a false alert. The supervisor ordered a pause. The schedule for the day was stopped immediately. Adam was escorted back to a holding room nearby, not as punishment, but as precaution. Rocky was taken to another room, though he resisted slightly, still pulling toward the space where Adam had been standing. Within minutes, the prison atmosphere changed completely. Radios buzzed. Phones rang. Procedures were activated that had not been used in years. The possibility that something had been missed could not be ignored. No one wanted to make a mistake that could not be undone. Adam sat alone in the holding room, his heart racing. He did not understand what was happening, but he sensed that Rocky had done something important. Memories of Rocky's discipline and intelligence returned to him. He had trusted that dog with his life many times. Mark returned to Adam and spoke calmly. He explained that the process was being paused due to the dog's reaction. Adam listened quietly, his face pale but controlled. He asked no questions. He simply nodded. Elsewhere in the prison, a team began reviewing old evidence. Files were pulled from storage. Boxes covered in dust were opened. Reports were read again line by line. Details that had once seemed small were now examined closely. Rocky was brought back to the area under careful supervision. This time, he was guided near sealed evidence containers. One by one, he was led past them. At first, he showed no reaction. Then he stopped suddenly at one container. He barked sharply and sat down again. The handler confirmed the signal. The container was marked and removed. Inside were items collected long ago, items that had not been questioned for years. The room filled with tension as the container was opened under strict rules. What they found did not match the original records. Materials were present that had never been properly documented. The discovery raised immediate concerns. If this evidence had been mishandled or misunderstood, then everything connected to the case needed review. The supervisor ordered an emergency review panel. External officials were contacted. The process moved quickly now, driven by urgency and fear of error. Adam's name appeared again and again in the documents, tied to decisions made long before. Adam waited as hours passed. He sat on a bench, staring at the floor, replaying memories of Rocky's training. He remembered teaching Rocky to stay calm, to focus, to trust his instincts. He never imagined those lessons would return to him in this way. Mark returned again, this time with a different expression. His voice was careful as he explained that new findings required further investigation. Adam listened, his hands gripping the edge of the bench. For the first time in years, uncertainty entered the space where acceptance had lived. Rocky was allowed to see Adam again briefly. The dog approached calmly and rested his head against Adam's leg. Adam placed a hand on Rocky's head, his touch steady. He whispered thanks, though no one else heard the words. The investigation continued through the night. Records from outside agencies were requested. Old witnesses were contacted. Timelines were checked and rechecked. Each step revealed small gaps that had once been ignored. As dawn approached, the truth began to form more clearly. The case against Adam was not as solid as it once appeared. Decisions had been rushed. Assumptions had been made. Important details had been overlooked. By morning, the supervisor stood before the review panel with a heavy expression. The process that was meant to end a life had instead opened a door that should never have been closed. And at the center of it all sat a loyal dog who had refused to stay silent. Adam remained in the holding room, unaware of how close everything was to changing. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly, feeling Rocky's presence nearby. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. The final wish he had made was no longer just a goodbye. Morning light entered the prison slowly, touching the cold walls with a pale glow. The building felt different now, as if it were holding its breath. Guards moved with caution, speaking in low voices, aware that something important was unfolding. Adam sat in the holding room, unaware of most details, yet he sensed a shift in the air. The review panel worked without rest. Officials from outside the prison arrived with serious expressions and thick folders. Every document connected to Adam's case was placed on the table. Dates were checked carefully. Statements were read aloud again. Each decision from the past was questioned with fresh eyes. Rocky remained nearby, under supervision. The dog lay calmly, yet his attention never drifted. His presence alone reminded everyone why this review had begun. No one dismissed him now. Even those who doubted earlier watched him with respect. The evidence container that Rocky had signaled was examined again. Experts confirmed that the materials inside did not match the original descriptions. Records showed missing steps and unclear handling. The discovery raised deep concern among the officials. If one part was wrong, others might be wrong as well. Old witness statements were replayed. Some voices sounded unsure even years later. Timelines showed gaps that had never been explained. A key report referenced a test result that no longer existed. The more they looked, the more fragile the case appeared. Mark stood near the doorway, listening quietly. He had delivered many final notices in his career. Now he realized how close he had come to delivering another one without knowing the truth. The thought weighed heavily on him. Adam was finally called into a small interview room. He entered calmly, though his hands shook slightly. Officials asked him to speak about the events from years ago. He answered honestly, repeating what he had always said. His story had never changed. What changed now was how people listened. As Adam spoke, the panel compared his words with the records. This time, they noticed how well his account aligned with overlooked details. Small things he had mentioned long ago suddenly made sense. His calm consistency stood in sharp contrast to the uncertain evidence. Rocky was brought into the room briefly. The dog walked directly to Adam and sat beside him, pressing close. The sight affected everyone present. The bond between them was clear. It was not built on fear or command, but trust. One official asked about Rocky's training history. Adam explained how he had spent years teaching the dog discipline and focus. He described long nights of practice and patience. His voice carried pride, not for himself, but for Rocky. As the hours passed, the review reached a turning point. A senior official spoke quietly but firmly. He stated that the case could not move forward under these conditions. Too many questions remained unanswered. Too many mistakes had been ignored. The room fell silent. Adam sat still, absorbing the words. He did not react with celebration or anger. He simply lowered his head and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, the future was no longer a closed door. The panel ordered an immediate suspension of all final actions. A deeper investigation was approved. External review teams were assigned. The decision was official and recorded. What had once felt final was now uncertain. Mark escorted Adam back to a private room, this time with a different tone. His voice carried respect instead of duty. He explained that the process was paused and that Adam would remain safe while the investigation continued. Adam nodded slowly, still processing what he heard. Rocky stayed with Adam longer than before. The dog rested beside him, calm and steady. Adam placed his hand on Rocky's back, feeling the familiar warmth. He whispered words of gratitude, his voice barely audible. News of the suspension spread quietly through the prison. Guards spoke among themselves, reflecting on how close they had come to a grave mistake. Some felt relief. Others felt shame. All felt changed. As night returned, Adam lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every moment with Rocky that day. He realized that his final wish had become something else entirely. It had become a voice when he had none. Outside the prison, officials worked late into the night. Calls were made to courts and review boards. Files were sent for independent examination. The system moved slowly, but now it moved with purpose. Rocky slept near Adam, his breathing steady. Even in rest, he seemed alert, as if guarding something precious. Adam watched him quietly, tears forming in his eyes. Not from fear, but from hope he had long buried. The truth was no longer hidden. It had begun to rise, guided by loyalty and instinct. What awaited Adam was still unknown, but one thing was certain. The story was far from over. The days that followed felt longer than any Adam had known before. Time no longer rushed toward an ending, yet it moved with heavy steps. Each morning, light entered the prison and reminded him that he was still there, still breathing, still waiting. Hope stayed quiet inside him, careful not to rise too fast. The investigation grew larger with every passing day. Teams from outside reviewed everything connected to the case. Old evidence was tested again. Records were compared with modern methods. Mistakes that once hid behind routine now stood exposed. What was once treated as certainty began to fall apart piece by piece. Adam was called in several times to speak again. Each time, he answered with the same calm honesty. He never added new details. He never changed his story. The officials noticed this consistency and wrote it down carefully. His truth remained steady while the past records continued to weaken. Rocky became a symbol within the prison. Guards spoke about him quietly. Some said the dog had done what people failed to do. Others said loyalty had proven stronger than fear. Rocky himself remained simple and calm, unaware of the role he had played. He stayed close to Adam whenever allowed, resting beside him like a silent promise. One afternoon, Mark returned with news that carried weight. He explained that the review had reached a final conclusion. The errors in the case were too serious to ignore. Key evidence had been mishandled. Critical steps had been skipped. The ruling that once sealed Adam's fate was no longer valid. Adam listened without speaking. His chest felt tight as the words settled in. He had prepared himself for many endings, but not for this moment. The room felt unreal, as if he were standing between two lives. The official decision was delivered soon after. Adam's sentence was overturned. The process that once moved without question was corrected at last. The truth, delayed for years, had finally found its way forward. Silence filled the room after the announcement. Adam sat still, his hands resting on his legs. His eyes slowly filled with tears, but he did not cry out. The release of years of quiet pain stayed gentle, controlled, and deeply human. Rocky sensed the change before anyone spoke again. He stood up and pressed close to Adam, wagging his tail softly. Adam placed both hands on the dog's head and leaned forward. For a long moment, he simply breathed. The days that followed brought new routines. Adam was moved out of isolation. Paperwork replaced waiting. Doors opened that had been closed for years. Each step felt strange and fragile, as if freedom itself needed careful handling. When the final moment arrived, Adam walked through the prison gates with slow steps. The sky above felt wider than he remembered. The air carried scents he had not known for a long time. Rocky walked beside him, steady and proud. Mark stood nearby and watched them leave. He felt a deep mix of relief and humility. He knew that one simple act of allowing a final wish had changed everything. The system had almost failed, but loyalty had not. Outside the prison, life waited quietly. Adam did not rush forward. He stood still for a moment, letting the world feel real again. Rocky sat beside him, calm and patient, as he always had been. News of the case spread slowly. Some spoke of justice. Others spoke of lessons learned too late. Adam did not follow the noise. He chose silence and gratitude instead. He returned to a small place far from crowds. There, days passed with simple routines. Morning walks with Rocky replaced prison walls. Quiet evenings replaced locked doors. Each ordinary moment felt precious. Adam often thought about the day he made his final wish. He realized it was never about saying goodbye. It was about being seen. Rocky had seen him when others did not. Years of silence ended because a loyal dog trusted his instinct. That truth stayed with Adam as he rebuilt his life step by step. He learned that even in the darkest places, truth could wait patiently. Rocky grew older beside him, slower now but still alert. Adam cared for him with the same devotion they had always shared. Their bond remained strong, shaped by hardship and trust. The story did not end with anger or revenge. It ended with correction and humility. It ended with loyalty proving stronger than fear. Adam lived quietly after that, carrying gratitude instead of bitterness. He knew that life had given him another chance, not through power or words, but through a simple act of love. And every time he looked at Rocky, he remembered how one final wish had turned into a new beginning.